The day I realized my marriage was a lie started with a chair. Not just any chair, mind you. It was the chair, a hideous, overstuffed relic from the 90s that looked like it had been stolen from a retirement home. It was Sarah's prized possession. She swore it was the most comfortable thing on the planet, despite the fact that sitting in it felt like being swallowed by an overenthusiastic marshmallow. The chair lived in the corner of our living room, untouched by my existence. And for 8 years, Sarah had fought tooth and nail to keep it. I'd made jokes, pleaded, even offered to buy her a brand new, actually comfortable chair, but she never budged. "It's sentimental, Thomas," she'd say, as if that explained why we had to live with something that belonged in a museum of bad furniture choices. And then, one day, I came home, and it was gone. Not moved. Not replaced. Gone. I stood in the doorway, staring at the empty corner like I'd walked into an alternate reality. I checked the garage, the basement, the backyard, because honestly, at this point, who knew? Nothing. It had vanished into thin air, taking a piece of Sarah's stubbornness with it. Now, a smarter man, someone with a keen sense of self-preservation, might have let it go. Might have thought, wow, what a gift. The chair is gone. Let's celebrate this miracle instead of questioning it. I, however, am not that man. So, like a fool, I brought it up at dinner. "Hey, Sarah," I said casually, spearing a piece of chicken with my fork. "Where's the chair?" She barely looked up from her plate. "Which chair?" I stared at her. Which chair? The woman had treated that thing like an emotional support animal for years, and now she didn't know which one I meant. "The chair," I said. "The one that looked like it belonged in an old folks' home. The one I've been trying to get rid of since the day we moved in." "Oh." She shrugged. "I donated it." I put down my fork. "You what?" "I donated it," she repeated, like this was a completely reasonable thing for her to do. "Figured we could use the space." Now, this was where the sirens should have gone off in my brain. Sarah was not the donate things type. She was the hang on to everything until the house resembles a well-organized hoarder's den type. This woman once made me keep a toaster that didn't even work because she liked the design. And yet, here she was, casually tossing out the one thing she'd fought me over for years? I narrowed my eyes. "And you just decided this on your own? No warning." She shrugged again, too busy cutting her food into needlessly tiny pieces. "It was just a chair, Thomas." I didn't say anything, but my brain was already flipping through every possible explanation. Maybe she'd finally come to her senses. Maybe a stroke of divine intervention had convinced her to let go of it. Or maybe, just maybe, she hadn't gotten rid of it at all. And that's when it clicked. Sarah hadn't donated the chair. She'd moved it. The only question was where. I dropped the subject for the night, but my mind refused to let it go. That chair had been an extension of Sarah herself. She wouldn't have just tossed it out without a second thought. The next day, while she was out running errands, a suspiciously vague activity she'd been doing a lot more lately, I decided to investigate. At first, I checked the usual places. The garage? No chair. The basement? Nothing. Even the attic, which required me to balance precariously on a rickety old ladder like some kind of suburban Indiana Jones, yielded no chair. Then I thought about her office. Sarah worked from home 2 days a week, which meant she had claimed an entire room in our house as her workspace. I, of course, had been banished to a tiny corner of the guest bedroom because apparently, my job as a financial analyst didn't require creative space. Now, here's the thing. Sarah never let me in her office. Ever. The one time I tried, she practically tackled me out of the doorway, ranting about privacy and boundaries. Which, okay, fine. I respected that. But now? Now I was a man on a mission. I approached the door like I was cracking a safe. I turned the handle. Locked. Locked. That was new. Sarah had never locked that door before. I stepped back, arms crossed, staring at it like it had personally insulted me. There was no logical reason for her to start locking her office. Not unless she was hiding something. And that's when I made my second stupid decision of the week. I grabbed the spare key. No, I'm not proud of what I did. Technically, this was an invasion of privacy. But in my defense, so was lying to your husband about donating a chair. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed? The chair. Sitting right there, in the middle of the room, like it had just teleported there. The second thing I noticed? The entire room had been rearranged. Sarah's desk was pushed against the far wall. The bookshelves had been cleared. The carpet had new furniture indentations that didn't match anything else in the room. Something had been moved. Something big. And then, As I turned, I saw it. The closet door. Slightly open. I moved toward it, heart hammering in my chest. I reached for the handle and pulled it open. Inside, stacked neatly on the floor, was a pile of men's clothes. Not mine. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the evidence in front of me. The button-down shirts, the pair of sneakers 3 sizes too big for Sarah, the unfamiliar jacket hanging from the rack. And just like that, everything fell into place. Sarah hadn't gotten rid of the chair. She'd made space for someone else. The rational thing to do would have been to walk away, pretend I never saw anything, and process my emotions like a mature adult. But let's be honest, rationality had left the building the moment I found a mystery man's wardrobe in my house. So instead of acting like a reasonable person, I crouched down and did what any betrayed husband with a questionable sense of self-preservation would do. I started inspecting the evidence. First, the shoes. Size 12. I knew this because it was printed right there inside the sneaker, staring at me like it knew what it had done. Sarah had always mocked me for being a size 10, claiming I had average guy feet. I'd never been offended before, but now I had to wonder, was she out there, admiring this guy's superior foot size? Did that even mean anything? Was I actually standing here, comparing myself to another man's shoe size? I put the sneaker down before I spiraled into a full existential crisis. Next, the shirts. Button-downs, neatly folded, not the kind I'd ever wear. They looked like something a guy who thought he was more important than he actually was would wear to a brunch he wasn't invited to. They even smelled faintly of fabric softener, which somehow made it worse. Who was this man? And why did he have better laundry habits than me? And then, the real kicker, a toothbrush. It was sitting there on the shelf, right next to Sarah's stack of unused planners and her abandoned yoga mat. A whole extra toothbrush in my house. Now, some people might say, Thomas, maybe it's just a spare. And to those people, I'd say, why don't you stop lying to yourself and face the cold, harsh reality of life? Because no one keeps a spare toothbrush in the back of their locked office closet unless they're up to something shady. And Sarah? Oh, she was up to something all right. I grabbed the toothbrush and stared at it like it held all the answers. This thing had been in someone's mouth. A mouth that wasn't mine. A mouth that had probably laughed at me behind my back, sitting in my chair, in my house, with my wife. At this point, my hands were itching to do something. But what? Throw the toothbrush in the trash? Set the whole closet on fire? Neither of those felt particularly productive or legally sound. Instead, I took a deep breath and did what any self-respecting man in my position would do. I left everything exactly where I found it. And then, I locked the office door behind me. See, if Sarah thought she was smart, she was about to learn something new. I could be smarter. Because now, I wasn't just some oblivious husband who never noticed the signs. No, I was watching. And the best part? She had no idea. That night, I sat on the couch, watching Sarah go about her usual routine like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't hidden another man's wardrobe in our house. She plopped down beside me, scrolling on her phone with the same level of disinterest she'd had for months. I glanced at her, waiting, wondering if she'd bring it up. If she'd show even a flicker of guilt. Nothing. It was impressive, really. The sheer confidence. The ease with which she carried herself, completely unaware that I'd been rummaging through her secrets just hours before. So, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I started asking questions. Hey, I said, keeping my voice casual. I was thinking we should rearrange some of the rooms. Sarah didn't look up from her phone. What? The rooms, I repeated. Like, your office. Maybe we could turn it into a guest room or something. You don't really need a whole separate space, right? That got her attention. She locked her screen and turned to me, eyebrows slightly furrowed. Why would we do that? I shrugged. Just feels like wasted space. We never have guests over because, you hate people. She rolled her eyes. I don't hate people, Thomas. Really? Because I'm pretty sure I've heard you call 90% of our neighbors insufferable. That's not hate, she said. That's just having standards. Right. The woman who once refused to speak to our mailman because he had an untrustworthy face was now suddenly reasonable. Anyway, I continued, I just think it's something to consider. Maybe clear out some of the extra stuff in there. Sarah's jaw tightened, but it was subtle, so subtle that if I hadn't already known she was hiding something, I might have missed it. There's nothing in there that needs clearing, she said, a little too quickly. Oh, really? I asked. Because last time I checked, you had a whole pile of stuff in the closet that looked like it belonged to someone else. That was it. The exact moment she froze. A half-second of hesitation before she forced a laugh that was just a little too forced. What are you even talking about? I leaned back, stretching my arms behind my head. You know, the extra clothes, the men's shoes, the mysterious toothbrush. I looked at her, raising an eyebrow. I assume that's all part of your minimalist aesthetic? Her expression flickered, just for a second, before she recovered. Oh, that. Yeah, I was just holding on to some stuff for a friend. A friend. I stared at her. A friend? Yeah. Which friend? She hesitated. That was all I needed. Because here's the thing, Sarah had no friends. At least, not the kind who would randomly drop off a set of clothes, a toothbrush, and whatever else she'd been stashing away. If she had a friend, I would have heard about them by now, because Sarah was the kind of person who couldn't experience even mild inconvenience without announcing it to the world. Oh, just someone from work, she added, waving a hand dismissively. Another mistake. Sarah worked in accounting. You know what accountants don't typically do? Lend each other sneakers and button-down shirts. I tilted my head. Wow, you must be really close. She shrugged, clearly wanting the conversation to end. It's not a big deal, Thomas. Oh, totally, I agreed. I mean, it's perfectly normal to keep another man's belongings hidden in your locked office. I'm sure it's just a totally innocent, explainable situation. She swallowed. Just slightly. And that's when I knew. Sarah might have been a good liar, but I was better. The thing about catching someone in a lie is that it never stops at just one. It unravels. One thread pulls another, and before you know it, the whole sweater of deceit is sitting in a tangled mess at your feet. And Sarah? She had knitted herself a full three-piece suit of lies. After our little conversation about the friend from work, I did what any reasonable man in my situation would do. I waited. I didn't accuse her outright. I didn't throw a fit. I didn't do the whole dramatic, "How could you do this to me?" speech that people in movies seem to love so much. No, I just let her sit in it. Let her wonder if I believed her. Let her watch me go about my usual routine like nothing had changed. Because the worst thing you can do to a liar? Make them wonder what you know. And, as expected, it took exactly 3 days for Sarah to start acting strange. Stranger than usual, I mean. First, she started locking doors that had never been locked before. Not just the office this time, the bedroom door while she was in there, the bathroom when she showered, even the closet in the hallway where we kept extra towels. It was like she suddenly thought she was living with a burglar instead of her husband. Then came the questions. "Hey, what are you doing today?" she'd ask, pretending to be casual. The first time she asked, I actually answered her. "Work." She nodded, looking a little too relieved. Red flag. The second time she asked, I made a fake plan. Thinking of taking the day off. Might stay home, catch up on some stuff. She nearly choked on her coffee. Oh, all day? All day. That day, Sarah suddenly had urgent errands to run. For 6 hours. The third time, I just said, "Why?" She stammered. Sarah never stammered. That's when I knew I had her. Now, a smarter man might have let this go. Might have waited for more proof before making a move. But I wasn't interested in being smart anymore. I was interested in making her sweat. So I pushed back. The next morning, she was getting dressed, moving faster than usual. "Got plans?" I asked, sipping my coffee. She hesitated. "Just work." "Ah, busy day?" "Yeah, a few meetings." I nodded like I believed her. "Mind if I stop by for lunch?" She blinked. "Once. Twice. Lunch." "Yeah, thought I'd bring you something. You've been working hard lately." Sarah didn't know how to respond. It was beautiful. "Oh, I don't know," she stammered. "I might have to work through lunch." "That's fine," I said, all smiles. "I can just drop it off." Her face twitched. She scrambled for an excuse. "Actually, I already have lunch plans." "With?" I waited. "With?" Megan. Megan. Her coworker. The same Megan who, just 2 weeks ago, Sarah had referred to as the most painfully boring person to ever exist. I grinned. "Great. I'll bring enough for both of you." Sarah's left eye twitched. It took exactly 5 minutes for her to fake a phone call in the bathroom, come back, and announce that Megan had canceled. So tragic. I leaned back, stretching. "Guess I'll just see you at home, then." Her laugh was too forced. "Yeah, guess so." And that's when I knew without a doubt she was going to make a move. And I was going to be ready. Sarah left in a hurry. I waited 10 minutes. Then, I grabbed my car keys and followed her. Now, before anyone calls me crazy, let me just say this was research. Sarah was lying. Sarah was hiding something. I was just making sure I got the full story. She didn't drive to work. She didn't drive to Megan's. She drove right past all of those places and headed straight to a part of town we never had any reason to be in. And she didn't even park in a normal spot. She pulled into a random driveway. A very nice driveway. The kind of driveway that belonged to someone who had money. I pulled up a little further down the street, just out of sight. Sarah got out of the car, fixed her hair in the side mirror, and walked straight to the front door like she'd done it 100 times before. Then, she rang the bell. And I watched as the door opened to reveal the man I now hated more than anyone in the world. Todd. Todd, the guy she'd sworn was just someone she worked with. Todd, whose shirts were definitely in my wife's closet. Todd, whose ridiculously large sneakers I had found just days before. Todd, who was now grinning at my wife as she stepped inside his house like she belonged there. And me? I sat in my car and smiled. Because now I had everything I needed. I always imagined that if I ever caught Sarah cheating, there would be some dramatic, earth-shattering moment, maybe me bursting through the door like an action hero, catching them in the act, throwing out some devastating one-liner that would haunt them for years. Instead, I was sitting in my car, watching my wife walk into another man's house like she owned the place. And honestly, I felt bored. Not because it wasn't infuriating, oh, it absolutely was, but because it was too easy. No theatrics. No big emotional reveal. Just Sarah thinking she was clever when, in reality, she had all the subtlety of a toddler trying to hide a stolen cookie. Todd. That was the guy? I don't know what I was expecting, but Todd? The same Todd I had met at one of Sarah's work parties? The guy who laughed at his own jokes and said things like, not to brag, but I drive a fully loaded sedan? This was the competition? I almost felt insulted. But, more importantly, I finally had all the confirmation I needed. For the first time in weeks, I felt completely in control. And now that I had the truth, it was time to do something about it. But I wasn't about to go for the usual, predictable reactions. No dramatic confrontations. No sad, teary-eyed speeches. No revenge affairs or wrecking cars. No. Sarah didn't deserve passion. She deserved to feel stupid. And I was going to make sure she did. The first thing I did? I took out my phone, snapped a couple of clear photos of Sarah and Todd at his doorstep, then drove straight home. Sarah wasn't expecting me back so soon, which gave me the perfect opportunity to set the stage. First, I grabbed a cardboard box from the garage. A nice, big one. Then, I went straight to Sarah's office, her private sanctuary, and started packing up every single thing she had that wasn't nailed to the floor. Her laptop? In the box. Her work files? In the box. That fancy coffee mug she claimed was the only one that made her coffee taste right? Right in the center. And, of course, the toothbrush from her little secret closet. Front and center, sitting on top like the cherry on a betrayal sundae. Then, I locked her office door again, but this time, I changed the lock. I wasn't kicking her out. Yet. I just wanted to watch her squirm. Once that was done, I grabbed her car keys. Sarah loved that car. She called it her baby, which, frankly, was weird, because she never took care of it. She couldn't even remember to refill the windshield wiper fluid. But she had one rule: no one else drives it. Well, that rule was about to change. I drove it straight to my buddy Greg's dealership and put it up for sale. Not permanently, of course. That would be insane. But Greg owed me a favor, and all I needed was for Sarah to think it was gone. She'd come home, find her office locked, her stuff in a box, and her beloved car missing. And I wouldn't say a word. I was going to let her explain herself. And, judging by how bad she was at lying, I couldn't wait to hear what nonsense she came up with. By the time Sarah got home, I was already settled on the couch, flipping through channels like I didn't have a care in the world. She walked in, tossed her purse on the counter, and headed toward the hallway, then stopped. I didn't look up, but I heard it. The rattle of the locked doorknob. The pause. The second, more forceful attempt. Then, the silence. A few seconds later, she walked back into the living room, casual as ever. "Hey," she said, like nothing was wrong. "Did you change the office lock?" I kept my eyes on the TV. "Yep." She waited for me to say more. I didn't. "Why?" she finally asked. I shrugged. Felt like it. Silence. Then, a small laugh. Forced. "Okay, but I need to get in there. I have work files in there." "Oh, I know." I gestured toward the box on the coffee table. Sarah's face barely twitched. "What's all this?" I picked up the remote. "Your stuff." She blinked. "Why is it in a box?" Felt like it. She laughed again. This time, a little too sharp. Okay, what's going on? I finally looked at her. Really looked at her. She was nervous. She wasn't used to this. Me being unpredictable. Sarah liked control. She liked having all the answers before the questions were even asked. And now, she had no idea what I was thinking. I stretched, letting the silence sit just long enough. Then, I said, "How's Todd?" Sarah's entire body locked up. She recovered quickly, I'll give her that. But there was a half-second of panic before she forced a frown and said, "Who?" I smiled. "Todd. You know. Your friend from work. The one you visit during your lunch breaks." Her expression didn't change. But her hands did. She was gripping her purse strap like she wanted to strangle it. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, voice too steady. I nodded, acting like I believed her. Right. Must have been someone else. Sarah hated that. She wanted me to react, to yell, to get upset. Instead, I leaned forward, grabbed my phone, and flipped through my photos until I landed on the one I wanted. Then, I turned the screen toward her. And there it was. Sarah, standing at Todd's door, smiling, walking inside. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, watching the moment her entire world cracked. For the first time since this whole mess started, Sarah was speechless. And I had never felt better. If there was one thing I had underestimated about Sarah, it was her ability to adapt under pressure. Most people, when caught red-handed, go through a predictable set of reactions: denial, anger, bargaining, maybe a few fake tears. But Sarah? No. She stood there, staring at the photo of herself walking into Todd's house, and instead of panicking, she did something far more interesting. She smirked. Not a nervous smirk. Not an "I messed up" smirk. No, this was a calculated smirk. Like she had already planned for this exact scenario and was just waiting to execute whatever came next. And then, in the calmest voice possible, she said, "So, what are you going to do about it?" Now, I'll admit, that threw me off. I had been expecting anything but that. Maybe an excuse. Maybe even a desperate attempt at turning it around on me. But not this. I tilted my head, studying her. "That's your response?" She shrugged. "I mean, yeah. You obviously already knew. Otherwise, you wouldn't have played your little mysterious box of office stuff game." She crossed her arms, leaning against the wall like we were casually discussing weekend plans. "So, again, what are you going to do?" I had to give it to her. She had nerve. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Haven't decided yet." She scoffed. "Please. You've already been plotting something. You don't just lock me out of my own office and sell my car for fun." I didn't correct her. I let her think the car was gone. That was part of the fun. She sighed dramatically, like this whole thing was inconveniencing her. "All right, Thomas. You got your little revenge. Congrats. Can we drop it now?" I blinked. "Drop it?" "Yes." She pushed off the wall, grabbing her phone off the counter. "You've been weird and petty for weeks. You got what you wanted, your gotcha moment. So let's just move on like adults." I just stared at her, waiting for the part where she started making sense. "Move on," I repeated. "Yes." She started typing something, completely unfazed. "You don't need to do anything dramatic. No divorce. No public meltdown. We can just," she waved a hand, like she was swatting away a fly, "keep things as they are. You don't ask questions. I don't ask questions. We both get what we want." I actually laughed. Out loud. Sarah glanced up, frowning. "What's so funny?" I shook my head. "You actually think I'd stay married to you after this?" She rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Thomas. You're not stupid. Think about it logically." That was rich. She took a few steps closer, lowering her voice like she was explaining something complicated to a child. "You file for divorce? I take half. At least. Maybe more, if I play my cards right." She smiled, casually threatening me like it was no big deal. "And let's be real, you work too much to win a fight in court. Who do you think the judge is going to side with? The stable, respectable woman who made a mistake? Or the angry, vengeful husband who starts selling his wife's things out of spite?" I could see what she was doing. She wanted me to panic. She thought if she made me feel trapped, I'd back off. That I'd accept her terms and let her continue her little arrangement without consequences. Unfortunately for Sarah, she miscalculated. Because I had no intention of playing fair. I let the silence drag out, watching as her smugness grew. She really thought she had one. Then, I smiled. "All right." She blinked. "All right what?" "You win," I said, stretching. "No divorce. No fight. You can have what you want." Sarah narrowed her eyes. She wasn't expecting me to fold that easily. Good, she said slowly, trying to read me. I nodded. Yep, let's do it your way. And just like that, I became the perfect husband. Sarah thought she had one? Fine. Let her think that. But I was going to make her regret it. The first thing I did was stop arguing. If Sarah wanted to play dirty, I was going to let her dig her own grave. I gave her space. Let her feel safe. Let her think I was accepting the situation. She started staying out later? I didn't ask questions. She started acting bolder? I didn't react. I even started agreeing with her. Hey, Thomas, I think we should keep separate finances from now on. Great idea, Sarah. I'm going to need my own bank account. Of course. Makes sense. Oh, and I might be traveling more for work. Totally fine. Do what you need to do. She loved it. She thought she had full control. She didn't notice when I started gathering everything I needed. Bank statements. All in my possession. Her little separate finances account, set up under a joint marital agreement, which meant I had access. Every shady text she sent, backed up and saved. And when the time was right, I filed for divorce. But not just any divorce. I made sure she got nothing. Sarah expected me to explode, to be so blinded by rage that I'd act irrationally. But instead, I played it smart. I presented the perfect case. Sarah had been spending joint funds on her little side activities. Financial misconduct. Sarah had been lying about the state of our marriage while making financial decisions without my consent. Breach of trust. Sarah thought she could outsmart me in court. She didn't even make it that far. Because before she had a chance to fight, I did something even better. I sent everything to Todd's wife. Every single piece of evidence. Todd, as it turned out, was married. Sarah had been so confident that she had planned everything perfectly, but she hadn't even bothered to check if her boyfriend was actually single. His wife? She was a lawyer, and she was ruthless. Before Sarah could even think about coming after me for money, she was too busy dealing with Todd's wife ripping her life apart. I didn't have to do anything. I just sat back and watched as Sarah lost everything. And me? I walked away with everything she thought she was going to take. The funny thing about people like Sarah is that they never see it coming. They think they're the smartest person in the room, the one holding all the cards, the one pulling all the strings. They get so comfortable in their own little schemes that they forget one simple rule. When you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And Sarah? She had just won the grand prize in the stupidity sweepstakes. It all unraveled faster than I expected. The moment Todd's wife received my carefully curated package of evidence, it was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Todd, in an attempt to save his own skin, completely threw Sarah under the bus. I had no idea she was married. She told me she was getting a divorce. She said her husband was controlling. Oh, that was my favorite one. Because while Todd was scrambling to save his own neck, Sarah was suddenly facing a war on two fronts. On one side, she had me, taking her for everything she thought she was going to take from me. On the other side, she had Todd's wife, who, unlike me, wasn't interested in playing it slow. She wanted scorched earth. Todd lost his job. Sarah lost her reputation. And in the span of a single month, she went from smug and untouchable to completely alone. It was almost sad. Almost. But then came the best part. After weeks of silence, Sarah finally caved. I came home one evening, my home, not hers anymore, to find her waiting outside. I took one look at her and knew exactly what was coming. The carefully planned expression. The slightly messy hair to look disheveled but still attractive. The tired sigh like she had been through so much and just needed someone to understand. It was textbook Sarah. Thomas, she said, with a sad little smile. Can we talk? I pretended to think about it. No. Her smile flickered, but she kept up the act. Come on. Just 5 minutes. I sighed dramatically. Fine. But only because I'm curious to see which version of the story you're about to sell me. That got a reaction. Just a slight twitch in her jaw. But she recovered quickly. She exhaled like she was carrying the weight of the world. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I blinked. For what? She hesitated. For everything? I nodded. Uh-huh. And what specifically does everything cover? Her lips pressed together, like she was debating whether or not to double down or play the victim. I was in a bad place, she said. Oh, there it was. And Todd, he just manipulated me. I grinned. Well, that's interesting, because from where I was sitting, you looked very in control. She sighed again, this time more dramatic. I don't expect you to forgive me, Thomas. Oh, good, I said, clapping my hands together. Because I don't. That threw her. Hard. She had clearly expected some kind of game. Some kind of back and forth where she could plant little seeds of guilt or nostalgia and weasel her way back into my life. And now, she didn't know what to do. I just thought, she tried again, that maybe we could talk. Start over. You know, as friends. I stared at her. Sarah. Yeah. I smiled. Not nicely. We were never friends. That hit her. I saw it. The realization that this wasn't going to go her way. The moment she finally understood that she had lost. I took out my keys, unlocked my front door, and stepped inside. Right before I shut the door, I looked at her one last time and said, "You should have picked someone smarter than Todd." Then, I closed the door in her face. And that was the last time I ever saw Sarah. She tried. Oh, she tried. She sent emails. She had mutual friends reach out. She even sent one final, desperate message months later that just said, "Do you ever think about what we had?" I didn't respond. Because what we had, she threw it away. And me? I was finally free. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel